Greetings duelists, and welcome to another video. So, the European WCQ just concluded, which means it is pretty much the end or nearing the end of what is our current preparation for the next major Yu-Gi-Oh event, right prior to our next Forbidden Limited list. I think we have only one event slated in August, which I think is YCS Indianapolis, or I know it's a YCS. I think it's around August 17th. But outside of that, we have no other events before the World Championships, which then comes before Rage of the Abyss format. What I'm going to be doing here is, firstly, I'm going to dissect the current issues that we have in the current format, and then I'll be talking about stuff that you should be doing for preparation into the next format moving forward. But yeah, if you enjoy this kind of content, please like and subscribe, and feel free to just share in the comments whatever you want me to issue next. But without further ado, let's begin. So right now, the format has two major issues. Issue number one is the dominance of Fiendsmith Snake Eye. We already know that this is the most powerful deck in the format. There's nothing that is competing above this deck in power level. The only deck that is remotely close to this is the Jubel deck. And I know there are other decks in the format that are getting close to the Snake Eye range, and I will discuss that in a moment. But outside of the ceiling and the combo potential, Jubel and Snake Eyes are the two most dominant decks, and it's mainly because of the Fiendsmith engine. Outside of that, you do have other strategies that are getting very close to the tipping point. You have Tempai Dragons, you have Ritual Beast, which is pretty much Protoss, you have Gimme Puppet Nightmare or Branded, you have Shifter decks, which goes back to Ritual Beast, and you have other miscellaneous strategies like Runic Stun. And if you see a pattern with all these decks that are not Snake Eye, all of these decks have just incredibly unfair win conditions in order to just cheat out the game against Snake Eye. So I'm pretty sure Konami is aware of this, and their main caveat for giving us a Forbidden Limited list prior to August is for them to have a very thorough analysis and gathering enough hypothesis and data to know what they should be hitting into next format. So with that being said, we need to talk about what is going to happen to us moving forward. After our Forbidden Limited list and the World Championships, we have pretty much 1 month until October, because on the very beginning of October we're going to enter Rage of the Abyss format. And Rage of the Abyss is a very powerful set. It is not as meta impactful as Infinite Forbidden, but it does have a couple of cards that, with the correct ban list, could actually shake up the meta game. White Forest is getting a bit of support, so if you are a fan of that strategy, you should be looking into it. We have other contenders like maybe the Perform Mages. We have other 3-star cards. These are not necessarily Rage of the Abyss. There are some cards that are not guaranteed to be in there. I think there will be coming a Battles of Legends set in December. The 7th Tachyon is another example of this. But if we go to Rage of the Abyss, we do have a few very powerful cards. One very notable, and the one that's on everybody's radar, is Foaras. We already spoke about this card in this channel. We already talked about how dominant this card is. Another really dominant card that people should be keeping an eye out is on Dominus Impulse. This is another really powerful card. I think this is going to be the best hand trap, at least from this set, right next to Foaras. So keep an eye out on these two cards. I think these two cards are incredibly powerful. I think the format is going to be very defined by the impact of these two cards. Uh, if it doesn't like warp the metagame, it will definitely shift a lot of people's like game plan into playing around these two cards or playing them in your deck in some shape or form. We also have the Azamina strategy. I think the Azamina cards are very, very powerful. I think this is going to be another splashable engine that is going to be also impactful for the game. Probably not as strong as Fiendsmith, but it is going to be very potent, especially if they don't address the Snake Eye deck in a popular fashion, because this deck does play with the Sinful Spoils, and the Snake Eyes deck already is known for playing the Sinful Spoils as part of their strategy because it has incredible synergy with them. Another engine that I think you should be looking out for is the Metal Morph engine. This engine is not really that powerful. This is very similar to the Assault Mode Activate engine. However, this engine does have a lot of merit because of this card. Metal Copycat having the ability to turn into any monster type in the game is actually very significant because it means that it can access you to the Fiendsmith engine by itself. And just having the ability to just grab the Enhanced Metal Morph and using it to summon like crazy boss monsters like the Metal Zoa or the Red Eyes Full Metal Dragon, just because this is just a walking Omni-Negate, is something to be very respected. And then you have Virtue Stream. The reason I'm talking about Virtue Stream specifically is because of this card right here, Levisher Dragon. Levisher Dragon is a generic rank 3 monster that upon special summon can add Virtue Stream to your hand. Which means any deck that can play rank 3s or any deck that can play level 3 monsters that has access to this card as an interruption. This can go from Tempai Dragons to Scareclaw to Goblin Bikers to strategies like even Virtual World, if I would have to mention other niche ones. Or cards that can play the Terratop engine can also get access to this card. Most likely you'll probably see this in water decks, and I will talk about water in a moment. So that's another thing to look out for. Primordial, this is not a very, very powerful engine. However, this engine does deserve a lot of merit because if we do get a very impactful list, this could sneak its way into the metagame, especially with the pacifist like engine. And then the cards that I want to talk about are the Merlantians, and this will be in discussion talking about what you should be investing in before coming into this format. I think this deck will be very powerful. It will be one of those very oppressive, unfair decks that you kind of have to keep an eye out for. And if Konami does not hit this deck at all, and they actually hit Snake Eyes, we might just have a new problem in the format coming very soon. So now that I've spoken about releases and cards that you should be looking out for in Rage of the Abyss, what should be a fair investment for you coming into the next format? The first thing I have to disclaimer is I have no idea what could be on our next Forbidden Limited list. And if some things are amiss in that Forbidden Limited list, then older strategies that already are performing very well into the game could still be up for grabs as recommendations for the next format. We're talking about shifter decks that can play these two cards, or Tempai Dragon itself. Just to give a few examples. Okay, so this is in no particular order. This is a lot of cards that just represents a lot of archetypes I'd be looking into right now, or not necessarily just archetypes, also engines. I think at least in my end, I will be keeping these cards on my radar. I might do profiles with them in the future, because some of these strategies could be very well established into the metagame, and some of this could be just very, very impactful. Let's get the elephant out of the room and talk about Merlantians first. So the reason this deck is very, very powerful, and the reason you should not ignore this deck at all, is because they have access to this monster right here. For those who don't know, this is Deep Sea Minstrel, and this card reads, you can discard this card and one water monster to look at your opponent's hand and banish one card from their hand face up until the end phase. I don't really have to read the rest of the effect, but upon special summon, you can excavate to return a water monster to the top of your deck, and you can only use each effect once per turn. The reason this card is really powerful is because it is a card that gives you hand knowledge while you're comboing. And this also is a play starter for a bunch of your Atlantean plays. If you open this with Atlantean Dragoons, not only are you getting information out of your opponent's hand, but you already know what to do if you want to combo off entirely to your opponent. I think Nectaris is going to become like the new Snake Eye Ash of the format. Like, this is going to be like that very impactful normal summon that if you don't stop upon its summon, it's just going to snowball advantage and like start trickling against you like very far into the game. The deck now has access to summon Abyss Lead, and Abyss Lead is another hand ripping card. You also have other cards like Mulling Glacia. So you're potentially looking at a strategy that is probably going to like be looping your entire hand before you even get to play the game. And this deck does it very, very consistently, especially with the new cards that we're getting in Rage of the Abyss. So this is one very strong investment that I will be making right now. The other thing about this engine is that it can play Perulia the best, because it is a water monster, so you can make Bahamut Shark with it. You can pitch it for your like deep sea monsters or your Atlantean monsters. You can pitch it for your Mermail monsters, and it has like no real disc benefit. It's a level 4 water, so if you do the Bujinki Arashima play, you can summon this alongside Dragoon and just make Bahamut Shark. So yeah, keep an eye out for Merlantians. I think this might not be the best deck per se, but it is going to be one of those decks that you really have to keep an eye out for. Another investment I would be making is into Centurion. I know that I am like one of the main Centurion enjoyers in this channel, but if you already saw my discussion, like talking about Post Rage of the Abyss, you already know that Primera Primus is going to be in the set, and this is one of the more powerful Centurion cards, or more powerful synchro cards that we have in the game. This just increases the ceiling incredibly high, and any deck that can make this card will just play Centurion as an engine, especially since Archfiend King Calamity is still legal in the TCG. So moving forward, I'd say keep an eye out for Centurion. This is a very strong PSA. The other thing about Centurion right now is it is a deck or strategy that can play around both Mo Charming monsters. It does not special summon from the deck that much. It does no special summons from the hand, and it special summons from the extra deck enough times. But it really depends on what variant you're playing. If you're playing the White Forest variant, then you will get hurt by Furaras a lot. But if you're not playing the White Forest variant, or you're playing like a more purish build or a hybrid, that deck can navigate through Furaras and still lock you out of the game. So I'd say Centurion is a very, very safe option to invest right now, even if they do end up banning Calamity. Another strategy that I'd be looking into is into Memento. One disclaimer that I will make right here, Memento is best played with the Fiendsmith engine, so it is not budget. However, if they actually really curve stomp Snake Eyes, Memento will probably be the third best strategy that can utilize the Fiendsmith strategy right after Yubel and Snake Eye. And the other thing that makes Memento really powerful is specifically Memento Goblin. We will have 6 new starters for this deck, and some of them can play through hand traps. And the card that makes it all possible is the Memtolian Goblin monster, because it is a Goblin monster by name, so it interacts with the new Goblin Biker cards. So at the time of this recording, Mementolian is a little bit not budget friendly, but it is a very safe investment and to be looking into right now. Let's talk about Mimigul. So Mimigul is a TCG exclusive archetype. It has shown very, very significant promise as far as card design wise goes. This is not an actually strong metagame for it, but because of the environment that we're looking into right now, but in a more polished ban list or a more polished metagame, this deck could actually be a very, very viable contender. I am not going to give a PSA when it comes to future support, because Konami has not done well with that with the past 3 TCG exclusive archetypes. However, this archetype by itself, with the first wave of support, is already looking very promising and might even be problematic in the future because of this card. So yeah, I'd say keep an eye out for Mimigul. I'd say it's a very safe investment that you could be making right now. It is fairly budget compared to all the other mentions that I've made earlier. So that's something to keep in mind. I want to give a disclaimer when it comes to Flow Unders or any other shifter deck. The problem with this deck right now, and the same problem goes for Exo Sister and Ritual Beast, is the popularity of Mochormi Perulia. I think moving forward, both this and Foraros will be in a few people's main decks or side decks, which makes it a very problematic for this deck to navigate through both. So keep an take that as a disclaimer if you want to invest into Flow Unders. That being said, I don't think Perulia will be in a lot of people's main decks. I think it's going to be more on the side deck pattern, and if Foraros is going to be in everybody's main deck, as a lot of people are predicting it could, that could be a very vantage point for Flow Unders, because this deck does not special summon at all. And take note, this is a deck that can actually play Foraros better than other decks, because in the off chance you just dead draw the Foraros or just draw into multiple copies, you can use that card as fodder for Advent or fodder for other plays, for example the Cavalry spell, in order to get your plays going with Flow Unders. I want to talk about the Millennium engine. This is one engine that plays around both Mochormi monsters, and it is a very strong combo extension strategy that is a lot more budget than the Fiendsmith one. And if Konami ends up addressing the Fiendsmith engine in any shape or form, I think this engine is going to be a little bit more viable than Fiendsmith, because it exhausts way less cards out of your extra deck than it does with Fiendsmith. This, and these are just all extender monsters. Million Shield is the weakest one. The best one would be Sengenjin. So yeah, I'd say keep an eye out for these cards. I think they will have a spot in some meta decks in a foreseeable future. Another investment I would make are into the Horus engine. The Horus engine is actually dwindling in price right now, especially since they announced reprint for it in the Megatins. This is another strategy that also, or another engine that also plays around both Mochormi monsters, because their main summons are from the graveyard. And outside of the gimmick puppet strategy, not many strategies are playing this engine at all. This engine is a little bit weak to Drone Lovebird, which is a popular deck this format. But outside of that, I think this engine is quite phenomenal, quite to be respected, so on and so forth. So I think I covered pretty much everything. Unchained, not necessarily in Jobel, but Unchained just as an engine or strategy is another one you should be looking into. And the one thing that benefits Unchained more than a lot of other decks is that it is a strategy that can play Dominus Impulse. Like all the Unchained monsters are Water, Fire, and Dark, which means none of them get locked out by Impulse, which makes it a very respectable strategy to be playing. And outside of Impulse, this deck plays around a lot of Hunt traps as well, so that's another important note. As I already mentioned beforehand, the Fiendsmith engine should be respected because we are going to get more Fiendsmith cards, and I'm very sure that Konami is not going to hit this engine directly anytime soon. I think my last investment that I would make and the last recommendation I can do, and I think my best recommendation by far, there is an honorable mention, which is the Bestials. I will talk about the Bestials in a moment. But the very best investment, in my opinion, is Labyrinth. As of the time of this recording, Labyrinth has not been hit on any list. The deck has access to Rollback, which is an incredibly powerful trap card. The strategy can play Dominus Impulse, which is a really strong card going into next format. This deck does not lose to any of the Mocharmy monsters either. It could at most give them one draw. And the other thing about Labyrinth is if Konami addresses a lot of the strategies that like are just being problematic in the game outside of Snake Eye, there are not many decks that can contest Labyrinth. Like, this deck has already proven itself to be very favorable against Snake Eye. The one thing this deck loses to is Runic, and if you have seen like past deck profiles from both North America and Europe WCQs, you already know that pretty much other stun decks are like what is stopping this deck from being very popular right now. This deck is very adaptive in its playstyle as well. Like, you can play the furniture version, you can play the heavy trap version, you can play like a combo version that just mixes with Fiendsmith and with Unchained, like I have done earlier in the past. This deck is just really flexible on what it can do. And moving into next format, if Konami does a very good job with simplifying like the game with their TCG Forbidden Limited list, I'd say this might become one of the better decks in the format. There is one honorable mention I'm going to make to close this off. It's the Bestial monsters, and I'm not talking about just the level 6s. I'm also talking about Lubellion as well. To this day, these cards are not outside of Magnamut. These cards have not been hit on the Forbidden Limited list, and this strategy is going to be very favorable for you in a Fiendsmith dominated meta. If Labyrinth ends up becoming as strong as I want to think they will be, Bestials are going to be your aid as well. And I think I already spoken in the past. I predicted how Bestials were going to be very impactful into the current Fiendsmith meta, and they currently are. This is another engine that plays around Furoras as well. It does not play around Perolia as much because most of them are summons from the hand, but as far as the other Mochami goes, it plays around that as well. That's one of the reasons why you've seen me practice with the Centurion Bestial version for a couple of months beforehand, and now you're understanding a little bit why more and more. So I think that's it for my predictions until like heading into Rage of the Abyss format. I think we're in for a very rudious meta game still, despite what changes Konami might make involving the Snake Eye dominant format. I hope you found this video to your liking and understanding. I hope you found this informative. Until next time, keep practicing and keep dueling.